The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council happened within hours of Xylo sending his report. Representatives from 87 different alien species gathered in the Great Meeting Hall on Crucible Station. This was a massive space station that had been the center of galactic government for more than 10,000 years. The hall was enormous, with seats rising in circles around a central platform where speakers could address the assembly. Xylo stood on that platform and presented what the humans had offered and what they had threatened. He tried to speak calmly and clearly, but he could not completely hide the tremor in his voice when he described the human weapons. The Council's reaction was exactly what he expected. Different species had very different opinions. The warlord of the Therox Imperium was a huge creature named Gorthax. He walked on 4 legs and his body was covered in scars from many battles. He slammed his massive fist on his podium, making a sound like thunder. "This is an insult," he roared. "These humans dare to threaten us. We should destroy them immediately before they become a real danger. Send the entire war fleet." High Scholar Pantheris of the Luminari had a very different view. The Luminari were beings made of pure energy who existed as glowing patterns of light. Pantheris projected thoughts of calm disagreement. "Violence only creates more violence. Perhaps we should consider what they offer. What harm is there in recognizing their independence?" Councillor Vren spoke next. Vren belonged to the Hive Collective, a species where billions of individuals shared one mind. When Vren spoke, it was with the voice of countless beings. "The precedent worries us. If we give in to human threats, other species may try the same thing. The order of the galaxy depends on everyone following the same rules." The debate went on for 6 hours. Xylo watched it all from his position as an observer. With each passing minute, his fear grew stronger. He understood something that the Council did not seem to grasp. The humans had not made an empty threat. They had made a promise, and they would keep it. Finally, Councillor Morthax called for silence. He was the head of the Council, an old and respected leader. "Commander Xylo," he said, "you have spent more time observing these humans than anyone else. What do you recommend we do?" Xylo rose slowly from his seat. Every eye, every sensor, every consciousness in the enormous hall focused on him. He took a deep breath. He was about to make a decision that would define the rest of his life. "Honorable councillors," he said, "I recommend that we accept the human terms." Chaos erupted. Gorthax roared in fury. Others shouted questions and accusations. Some called Xylo a coward. Others demanded he explain himself. Morthax had to bang his ceremonial staff 3 times before the assembly quieted down enough for anyone to speak. "Explain yourself," Commander Morthax demanded. "Because I am afraid," Xylo said simply. The chamber fell completely silent. A member of the Kryn species admitting to fear was something that had never happened before. It was shocking beyond words. "Not afraid of their weapons," Xylo continued, "though those weapons are indeed formidable. Not afraid of their technology, though they are advancing at a speed that should be impossible. I am afraid of what drives them. I'm afraid of what makes them who they are." He activated his own holographic display. Images filled the air above the assembly. They showed scenes from human history. Ancient warriors holding defensive lines against enemies that outnumbered them 10 to 1. Scientists working through hundreds of failures to achieve a single breakthrough. Explorers venturing into dangerous unknowns. Ordinary people rising up against tyrannical rulers. "Humans do not calculate acceptable losses the way we do," Xylo explained. "They do not surrender when logic says they should. They have something that we have removed from ourselves in our quest for perfection. They have an irrational, stubborn, and somehow beautiful refusal to accept that some things are impossible. When they see a barrier that we consider absolute and unbreakable, they do not ask if they can overcome it. They ask how they will overcome it. To them, there is always a way." Xylo's voice grew stronger and more passionate. "If we go to war with humanity, we will win the first battle. We might win the first 10 battles or even the first 100. Our technology is better. Our experience is vast. Our resources are greater. But humans learn from every single defeat. They adapt. They endure. They find new approaches. And eventually, whether it takes 1 year or 100 years, they will find a way to win. Not because they are stronger than us, but because they will never ever stop trying." "You speak of only one species," Gorthax growled. "The Council commands thousands of species with millions of ships. One species that went from primitive rockets to threatening our blockade in less than 100 years. Xylo shot back. "One species that looks at our ancient certainties and sees opportunities for innovation. One species whose stories and legends contain more variations on the theme of impossible victory than all our civilizations combined have created in 10,000 years. Honorable counselors, we are not dealing with a typical emerging species. We are dealing with something unprecedented, something we have never encountered before, and yes, we should be terrified. High Scholar Panthera spoke softly, projecting thoughts of agreement. The commander raises valid concerns. Perhaps partnership is indeed wiser than subjugation. Perhaps we should learn from them rather than trying to control them. Other voices joined in. The debate shifted. Fear was a powerful motivator, even for species that claimed to be beyond such emotions. Xylo had made them see what he saw. He had made them understand the danger. The vote, when it finally came, was not unanimous. 43 species voted to accept humanity's terms. 31 voted for immediate military action against Earth. 13 chose to abstain, neither supporting nor opposing the decision. But 43 votes were enough to carry the motion. The blockade would be lifted. Humanity would be recognized as a sovereign and independent species, with full rights to explore and settle anywhere in the galaxy. The Galactic Council would extend an offer of partnership, not an offer of membership. Humans would be equals, not subjects. Xylo personally transmitted the decision to Ambassador Cole. Her response was brief, but he could hear the genuine emotion in her voice. Thank you, Commander. You have made the right choice. Humanity looks forward to learning from our galactic neighbors as equals. We have much to share with each other. 2 years passed. In that time, humanity integrated into galactic society with remarkable speed. Human traders appeared in markets across known space, offering unique goods and innovative services. Human scientists joined research projects, bringing fresh perspectives to ancient problems. Human diplomats established embassies on dozens of worlds, building relationships and trust. Some species embraced the humans enthusiastically. Others remained suspicious and kept their distance. The Therox Imperium, still angry about being forced to accept human independence, cut off all contact with human space entirely. Xylo himself had been promoted. He was now Chief of Galactic Security, largely because of his successful handling of the human situation. He worked closely with human representatives, including Colonel Jake Morrison, who had been appointed as Earth's military liaison to the Council. The two of them had developed something that humans called friendship. It was a concept that Xylo was still learning to fully understand, but he valued it greatly. Life seemed peaceful. The galaxy was stable. Trade flourished. Scientific cooperation produced new discoveries. It seemed like a golden age was beginning. Then the warning came. It arrived at 0342 hours by Galactic Standard Time. Sensors positioned at the very edge of civilized space detected massive distortions in the fabric of space itself. Before defensive fleets could even begin to respond, before warning signals could reach most systems, the enemy emerged from the darkness between stars. The Krell had returned. The Krell were the stuff of nightmares. They were a hive-minded species of warriors made of living silicon rather than carbon like most life forms. They consumed all biological matter in their path, breaking it down for resources. They had no interest in peace or negotiation. They existed only to expand and consume. 5,000 years ago, the last time the Krell had invaded, it had cost the Galactic Council 300 billion lives before the invaders were finally driven back into the deep space beyond known systems. Entire planets had been left as dead, barren rocks. Whole species had been wiped out completely. Now they were back, and their fleet was enormous. Sensors counted tens of thousands of warships, each one massive and powerful. They moved with perfect coordination, the hive mind controlling every ship simultaneously. The first 3 star systems fell within days. Planetary defenses that had stood strong for thousands of years were swept aside like they were nothing. Millions of beings died. Panic spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Council called an emergency session, and this time even the most aggressive and militant species were talking about retreat. Commander Xylo had lived for 300 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched 6 different alien civilizations grow from nothing to greatness. He had helped make peace between 40 different star systems. In all that time, he had never truly felt afraid. His people, the Kryn, had removed fear from their minds long ago through science and genetic changes. They understood what fear was, but they did not feel it. That changed the day he met the humans. The trip to Earth seemed like an easy job. Humans were new to space travel. They had only just learned how to leave their own solar system. Their technology was simple compared to other species in the galaxy. Their society was broken into many different countries that often fought each other. Their bodies were weak and they only lived for about 80 years. The Galactic Council sent Xylo to see if humans were ready to join the bigger community of spacefaring species. The meeting happened in a city called Geneva, in a building humans called the United Nations. Xylo brought 7 of the smartest diplomats from his people. They were greeted by a group of humans led by a woman named Patricia Cole. She had the title of Secretary General. Her hair was silver with age, but her eyes were sharp and intense. Something about the way she looked at them made Xylo uncomfortable, though he did not understand why. The first part of the meeting went well. Patricia spoke calmly about Earth and its history. She told them about the wars humans had fought and the peace they had made. She showed no fear of the 7-foot-tall alien standing before her. Her voice never shook or hesitated. When Xylo explained what humans needed to do to join the Galactic Council, Patricia listened carefully. He told her that Earth would need to give up some of their weapons. They would need to follow the rules that the Council made. They would need to accept that the Council would watch over them and guide them. Patricia smiled when he finished. It was a strange smile that Xylo could not read. "Commander Xylo," she said, "humanity thanks the Council for its kind offer, but we must say no. We cannot accept membership at this time." Xylo blinked all 3 of his eyes one after another. This was how his people showed confusion. "You are refusing? Secretary General, maybe you do not understand what this means. Species that say no to the Council are usually left alone. We put blockades around their star systems. They cannot trade with other species. They cannot learn new technology. They cannot access the knowledge of the galaxy." "We understand completely," Patricia answered, "and we still refuse. Humanity has learned something important through our long history. Once you give away your freedom, it is almost impossible to get it back. We will find our own way among the stars. We will do it without giving up our independence." For the first time in his long life, Xylo felt something strange in his chest. It was not quite fear yet, but it was close. It was uncertainty. He had expected humans to be grateful for the offer. He thought they might argue about some of the rules. He never expected them to simply say no. The meeting ended with polite words on both sides, but as Xylo walked back to his ship, he felt troubled. His second-in-command, an officer named Kelrix, noticed right away. "Commander, your brain patterns are disturbed. What is wrong?" "The humans," Xylo said slowly. "They are either very foolish or very dangerous. I cannot tell which one, and not knowing makes me feel uneasy." 3 weeks went by. The Galactic Council held a vote about what to do with humanity. They decided to put a blockade around the human solar system. 12 warships from different alien species gathered at the edge of human space. Xylo was put in charge of the operation. He felt confident that once humans felt the pain of being alone, they would change their minds and ask to join the Council. He was wrong about that. The blockade stayed in place for 6 months. During all that time, Xylo's ships detected no attempts by humans to break through. No messages came from Earth begging for mercy. From what they could see, humanity had simply accepted their isolation and gone back to living in their own solar system. But the instruments on Xylo's ships told a different story. Inside the solar system, humans were incredibly busy. Energy readings were appearing everywhere around Earth's orbit. New buildings and stations were being constructed around the planet Mars. The belt of asteroids between Mars and Jupiter became filled with mining operations. Everywhere Xylo looked, humans were building and working. When Xylo reported this to the Council, they were not worried. "Let them build their little toys," said Council Director Morthax. "They are like children playing games. When they get hungry for real progress and real technology, they will give in to our demands." But Xylo was not so sure. Something about all this activity made him nervous. His worry grew stronger when his science officer brought him a report. Her name was Valin, and she had been studying human broadcasts and communications. She had found something interesting in the human culture. The humans had thousands of stories about situations exactly like this one, stories about small groups fighting against huge empires, stories about weak people defeating strong enemies, stories about independence and freedom and never giving up, no matter how bad things looked. They loved stories about resistance, Balin explained. Their whole culture is full of tales about fighting battles they should lose, but winning anyway through determination and clever thinking and sacrifice. They do not think the way we think, Commander. We look at numbers and make logical choices. They add in stubbornness and hope and refuse to accept that some things are impossible. This information bothered Xylo deeply. Hope was not logical. Stubbornness could not be calculated. How could anyone predict or defend against enemies who did not follow the rules of rational thinking? The answer came on the 183rd day of the blockade. The sensors picked up a single human ship approaching the blockade line. It was small and clearly had no weapons. It broadcast a message on all frequencies. We request passage. We have a diplomatic message for the Galactic Council. Xylo allowed the ship to approach. It docked with his flagship. 3 humans stepped out. One was Patricia Cole, who now called herself Earth's first ambassador to the galaxy. The second was a military officer named Colonel Jake Morrison. He was built like a soldier, with muscles that spoke of years of training for combat. The third was a scientist called Dr. Sophie Turner. She carried a small electronic device. Ambassador Cole, Xylo greeted her formally. Has humanity reconsidered its choice? No, Commander, Patricia said with that same mysterious smile. We have come to present our counteroffer. Dr. Turner stepped forward and turned on her device. Suddenly, the room filled with holographic images. They showed designs for ships, weapons, and engines. Xylo felt his blood turn cold, something he had thought impossible for his species. Every design was based on human engineering, but they had jumped forward decades in development. The weapons were especially concerning. There were kinetic weapons that could bypass energy shields. There were nuclear-powered lasers. There was something Dr. Turner called relativistic kill vehicles, which sounded terrifying even though Xylo did not fully understand what they were. You have been busy, Xylo said quietly. We have been motivated, Patricia corrected him. Commander, humanity offers the Galactic Council a choice. End the blockade. Recognize that we are a free and independent species. If you do this, we will join the galactic community as equals, not as servants. We will trade with you. We will share knowledge. We will work together for the good of everyone. And if the Council refuses? Xylo asked, though he was afraid of the answer. Colonel Morrison spoke for the first time. His voice was heavy with certainty. Then we will break through your blockade by force. And Commander, we will succeed. What you see here is only what we want to show you. Our real capabilities are still secret. That was when Xylo felt it. Real fear. Not the idea of fear that he had learned about in school. Not the theory of fear from books. This was the actual emotion, raw and powerful in his chest. These humans, who had only known space travel for less than 100 years, were threatening the combined power of civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. And somehow impossibly Xylo believed they could do exactly what they promised. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was filled with fear. Xylo could sense it from every representative in the chamber. This was different from the calm debates about human independence. This was raw, primal terror. The Krell were not a diplomatic problem. They were an existential threat. Councillor Vren spoke first, and for the first time the unified voice of the Hive Collective sounded shaken. We cannot stop them. The numbers are clear. The Krell are too numerous and too powerful. We must fall back to our core systems. We must establish defensive lines around our most important worlds. We must prepare for a long siege and hope they overextend their supply lines. Many heads nodded in agreement. The math was simple and brutal. The Council could not match the Krell in open battle. Retreat and defense were the only logical options. Then Ambassador Patricia Cole stood up. She had aged noticeably in the 2 years since humans joined the galactic community. More of her hair had turned white. Lines had deepened around her eyes. But her voice was as steady as ever. With respect, Counselor, she said, retreat is not an option. Every system we surrender will feed the Krell. They will consume the resources. They will grow stronger. Meanwhile, we will grow weaker. Our morale will break. Our alliances will fracture. We cannot win a defensive war against an enemy that only grows more powerful with each victory. We need to attack them now. We need to hit them hard and keep hitting them until they break. Impossible, Gorthax rumbled. The Therox warlord had actually put aside his hatred of humans when faced with the Krell threat. We need time to gather our fleets from across the galaxy. We need time to coordinate our defenses and plan our strategy. Attacking now would be suicide. Then let us commit suicide together. Colonel Jake Morrison said, stepping forward to stand beside Patricia. His voice was calm but carried absolute conviction. Commander Xylo, how many ships can you assemble in the next 72 hours? Xylo did a quick mental calculation, accessing fleet deployment records through his neural interface. Perhaps 300 capital ships, maybe twice that number in support vessels like frigates and destroyers. Against the Krell numbers, it would be completely inadequate. We would be outnumbered at least 30 to 1. A start, Morrison interrupted. Earth can provide another 100 ships. They are not our newest designs, but they are everything we have that can fly and fight. We will send every vessel that can make the journey. 400 ships against tens of thousands. High Scholar Pantheris projected waves of disbelief and concern. Colonel, this is madness. This is throwing away lives for no purpose. Morrison smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had made peace with a terrible decision. High Scholar, did you ever study human history? Did you ever hear about a battle we call Thermopylae? Pantheris admitted that the name was unfamiliar. 2,400 years ago, Morrison explained. A tiny force of 300 Spartan warriors and about 7,000 other Greeks held a narrow mountain pass against a Persian army of perhaps 100,000 soldiers. They held for 3 days. They killed thousands of the enemy. They gave the rest of Greece time to prepare. They showed that the Persians could bleed. They showed that resistance was possible. Most of them died, but they changed the course of history. This is different, Friend protested. This is space warfare, not ancient combat with primitive weapons. The principle is the same, Patricia said. If we retreat now, every species in the galaxy will believe the Krell cannot be stopped. Fear will spread. Systems will surrender without fighting. The Krell will roll over us like a wave. But if we stand and fight, even if we lose, we show that resistance is possible. We buy time for the main fleets to assemble. We force the Krell to slow down. And maybe, just maybe, we find a weakness we can exploit. Xylo felt his heart's beating in unusual synchronization. This happened only in moments of extreme stress. He looked at Morrison and Patricia, these humans who were proposing what amounted to a suicide mission. And he realized something profound. They were not being reckless. They had carefully calculated the odds. They knew they would probably die. They were choosing to do this anyway because it was necessary. This was what he had tried to explain to the Council 2 years ago. This was that beautiful, terrifying, irrational human quality. They saw what needed to be done, and they did it regardless of the cost to themselves. I will lead the fleet, Xylo heard himself say. The words came out before he fully realized he was speaking. As Chief of Galactic Security, it is my responsibility. I will take every ship that can be assembled to the nexus point. The nexus point was a strategic location, a region of space where multiple major travel routes converged. It was the gateway to the galaxy's core systems. If the Krell took the nexus point, they would have clear paths to a dozen major worlds. I will stand with you, Morrison said simply. As will I, Patricia added. Other voices began to join in. Not all of them. Some species still advocated for pure defense, but enough agreed. Enough were inspired by the human willingness to sacrifice. Enough remembered old stories of courage against impossible odds. The decision was made. A fleet would assemble at the nexus point. They would hold the line or die trying. 3 days later, Xylo stood on the bridge of his flagship. It was a massive vessel called the Eternal Vigilance, bristling with weapons and protected by the best shields in the galaxy. But even this powerful ship seemed small and fragile compared to what was coming. Around him in space, 400 ships hung in formation. They came from a dozen different species. Kryn vessels with their elegant curves and advanced sensors. Therox battleships, massive and angular and covered in weapons. Luminary ships that glowed with inner light. Human frigates and destroyers, smaller than most but fast and maneuverable. Each ship represented thousands of crew members. Each ship represented families and homes and lives. Colonel Morrison stood beside Xylo on the bridge. The human had insisted on coming personally rather than commanding from a safer location. Patricia had wanted to come too, but Morrison had convinced her she was needed alive to coordinate the diplomatic and logistical efforts back at Crucible Station. The sensors began to ping. Ahead of them, space itself started to ripple and distort. The Krell fleet was arriving. 12,000 contacts, the sensor operator reported, her voice shaking slightly. Estimate 12,000 enemy warships. They are maintaining formation and advancing on our position. Xyloth looked at the tactical display. The numbers were even worse than he had feared. The Krell ships appeared as red dots on the screen, a massive cloud of hostile contacts. His own fleet looked like a thin line of blue dots, pitifully small in comparison. "Colonel," Xyloth said quietly, "I want you to know that it has been an honor serving with you. I am glad that I met your species. You have taught me much about courage." Morrison was checking the status of his weapon systems on a nearby console. He looked up and smiled. "Thank you, Commander. And I must tell you something. Right now, at this moment, I am absolutely terrified. My hands are shaking. My heart is racing. Every instinct I have is screaming at me to run away." "That surprises me," Xyloth admitted. "You seem so calm." "Being afraid and being calm are not opposites," Morrison replied. "Fear is natural. Fear is your body and mind telling you that the situation is dangerous. The trick is not to get rid of fear. The trick is to acknowledge it, accept it, and then do what needs to be done anyway. Commander, you told the Council 2 years ago that you were afraid of humans. Today I'm going to show you what humans do with fear. We use it, we let it sharpen our focus, we let it fuel our determination. And then we fight." The Krell fleet entered weapons range. Morrison opened a communication channel that reached every ship in the combined fleet. "All ships, this is Colonel Morrison. I will not lie to you about our situation. The odds are terrible. We are outnumbered 30-1. By every logical calculation, we should turn around and retreat. But logic has never stopped free beings from doing what must be done. The Krell think we will panic. They expect us to break and run. They have never faced an enemy that chooses to stand together. Today we show them what happens when free beings refuse to surrender. We fight for our worlds. We fight for our families. We fight for the future. Today we hold the line. Today we make them remember us." The response came in dozens of different languages from dozens of different species. But the meaning was universal. Every ship in the fleet sent back the same message. We stand together. We fight together. We hold the line. The Krell attacked. And the battle for the galaxy's future began. The battle raged for 7 hours. 7 hours that felt like 7 lifetimes. Xyloth had witnessed space combat before in his long life. He had seen battles between rival factions. He had observed military exercises and war games. But he had never seen anything like this. This was war on a scale and intensity that defied description. The Krell came in waves. Their ships moved with perfect coordination, controlled by the hive mind that connected them all. They expected the smaller defending force to panic and scatter. They expected chaos and confusion. They expected an easy victory. Instead, they encountered something they had never faced before. They encountered organized, creative, and absolutely stubborn resistance. The human vessels fought with a ferocity that seemed impossible for their size. They used tactics that made no sense according to traditional military doctrine. They would charge directly at enemy formations, appearing reckless, only to spin away at the last moment, while firing every weapon they had. When their weapons ran out of ammunition, they used their ships as weapons, ramming into Krell vessels at full speed. But the most important thing the humans did was teach the other species to fight the same way. Morrison's voice came over the communication channels constantly, directing the battle with a combination of tactical brilliance and creative chaos. "Kryn Squadron 3, he called out. "Collapse your formation. Make it look like you are retreating in disorder. Draw them toward the asteroid field." Xyloth watched as 3 Kryn ships broke formation and appeared to flee. The Krell, seeing what looked like easy prey, sent 20 ships in pursuit. When the Krell entered the asteroid field, Morrison gave another command. "Now." All nearby ships concentrated fire on those coordinates. A dozen ships from multiple species opened fire simultaneously. Their weapons converged on a single large asteroid. The asteroid exploded, sending massive chunks of rock flying in all directions. The Krell ships caught in the debris field were battered and damaged. Several were destroyed outright. The survivors retreated in confusion. Prey did not set traps. Prey did not use the environment as a weapon. The hive mind did not know how to process this information. A human frigate called the Defiant took heavy damage early in the battle. Its engines were failing. Its weapons were exhausted. The crew had 2 choices. They could abandon ship and hope to be rescued, or they could do something else. The captain of the Defiant was a woman named Commander Lisa Grant. She broadcast a final message on all frequencies. Tell our families we love them. Tell them we stood our ground. Tell them to remember us. Then she aimed her dying ship at a Krell dreadnought and pushed the engines to maximum. The Defiant accelerated, faster and faster, until it struck the enemy vessel at incredible speed. The collision destroyed both ships instantly. The explosion was so massive that it crippled 3 other Krell ships nearby. Xylo felt his fear transform into something else, something fierce and bright and powerful. He finally understood what Morrison had meant. Fear could paralyze you, yes. But it could also focus your mind like a laser. It could sharpen your resolve into an unbreakable blade. It could give you strength you never knew you had. "Commander," his tactical officer called out, "we have lost 43 ships. The Krell have lost 214 ships. But they are still advancing. They are concentrating their forces on our position." Xylo looked at Morrison. The human was bleeding from several wounds. A console had exploded near him earlier, throwing shrapnel across the bridge. But he was still fighting, still calling out orders, still refusing to give up. Xylo opened a channel to all ships in the fleet. His voice, when he spoke, carried that same weight and power that Morrison's voice had. "All ships, form up on my position. Tighten the formation. We will not yield. We will not retreat. We will make them pay for every meter of space with blood and fire. We will show them that free beings do not break. We stand together. We fight together. And we will hold this line until our last breath." The fleet closed ranks. Ships from species that had been enemies just a few generations ago fought side by side. Therox warriors coordinated their attacks with Luminari strategists. Kryn vessels used their advanced sensors to guide the weapons of less technologically advanced allies. Human crews, when their own ships were too damaged to fight, transferred to other vessels to replace fallen crew members. The Krell kept coming. They seemed endless. For every ship destroyed, 2 more appeared. The defenders fought with everything they had. Ships vented atmosphere. Hulls melted under concentrated fire. Brave beings died by the thousands. But they held the line. At hour 5 of the battle, when things looked darkest, a miracle happened. Space rippled again, but this time it was not the Krell. The sensors detected new contacts. Lots of new contacts. "Reinforcements." The sensor operator shouted, her voice filled with hope for the first time in hours. 3,000 ships just jumped into the battle space. It is the main council fleet. They mobilized faster than expected. Xylo felt a surge of hope so powerful, it made him dizzy. 3,000 ships. The council had assembled its full fleet, ahead of schedule, inspired by the desperate stand happening at the nexus point. Species across the galaxy had heard about the battle. They had heard about 400 ships holding off 12,000. They had been inspired to move faster, to send more ships, to commit everything they had. But it was the original 400 defenders, now reduced to 107 battered and damaged vessels, who led the final charge. They had held long enough. They had proven it could be done. They had shown that the Krell could be fought and hurt and stopped. "All ships," Morrison broadcast, his voice hoarse from shouting orders for 7 hours. "The reinforcements are here. Now we finish this. All damaged vessels fall back and regroup. All combat-capable vessels form up for a final assault. We are going to break their formation. We are going to show them that they picked the wrong galaxy to invade." The combined fleet, old defenders and fresh reinforcements together, pressed the attack. The weight of 3,000 additional ships turned the tide. The Krell formation, which had seemed unbreakable, began to crack. For the first time in recorded history, the Krell hive mind experienced something alien to its nature. It experienced doubt. How had such a small force held for so long? Why had the defenders not broken and scattered? What kind of beings would sacrifice themselves so readily? The questions created hesitation in the hive mind. Hesitation created confusion. Confusion created disorder. The Krell ships began to make mistakes. Their perfect coordination faltered. Ships collided with each other. Formations broke apart. And the combined fleet of free species, emboldened by the courage they had witnessed and the sacrifices that had been made, pressed their advantage ruthlessly. The battle turned into a rout. The Krell, who had expected easy conquest, found themselves retreating. They had suffered losses they had never imagined possible. Thousands of their ships were destroyed or crippled. The survivors fled back into deep space, abandoning their invasion. When silence finally fell across the battlefield, Xylo stood on his damaged bridge and looked around. The Eternal Vigilance had taken severe damage. Half the bridge consoles were destroyed. The air smelled of smoke and burned electronics. But they had survived. Against all odds, they had survived. Morrison stood next to him. The human's uniform was torn and burned. His face was covered in soot and dried blood from multiple wounds. One arm hung at an awkward angle, probably broken. But he was smiling. It was a tired, painful smile, but it was genuine. "We held the line," Xylo said. He still could not quite believe it. Against 12,000 ships, with only 400 defenders, we actually held the line long enough for reinforcements to arrive. "We held," Morrison agreed. His voice was barely above a whisper, hoarse from hours of shouting orders. "And you, Commander, felt real fear for the first time. Not just the concept of fear, but the actual emotion. You felt it fully." "I did," Xylo admitted, "and I do not wish to be rid of it. Because standing here with humans and other free beings feeling that fear but fighting anyway, I have learned something invaluable. Something my species forgot when we tried to engineer ourselves into perfection." "What is that?" Morrison asked. Xylo looked out at the debris field through the damaged view screen. He looked at the surviving ships, battered but victorious. He thought about all the beings who had died here today. That being afraid does not make one weak. What matters is what one does with that fear. You humans understand this instinctively. You have taught us that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is taking action in spite of fear. Courage is standing your ground when every logical calculation says you should run. Morrison nodded slowly, his tired eyes meeting Xyloth's. "The galaxy is going to be very different now, Commander. What we did here today changed everything. We proved that the Krell can be stopped. We proved that cooperation works better than isolation. We proved that free beings standing together are stronger than any hive mind or empire." "Indeed," Xylo agreed. "Because we have learned to stand together as equals. We have learned to be afraid and to fight anyway. We have learned that sometimes the most logical course of action is to attempt the impossible." He paused, then added with what might have been the closest thing to a smile his species could manage. "We have learned to be a little bit human." The war with the Krell continued for another 3 years. It was a brutal conflict that cost millions of lives across dozens of worlds. But the Battle of Nexus Point marked the true turning point. After that battle, something fundamental changed in the galaxy. Species that had operated independently for thousands of years learned to coordinate their military efforts. They learned to share intelligence and technology. They learned to trust each other with their lives. The rigid hierarchies and bureaucratic processes that had dominated the Galactic Council for so long were swept away, replaced by faster decision-making and genuine cooperation. The humans, those strange and stubborn beings who had only recently joined galactic society, found themselves at the heart of this transformation. Human tactics and human philosophy spread throughout the combined fleet. Human advisors were requested by species across the galaxy. The concept of impossible victory became possible victory. Gradually, through countless battles and skirmishes, the Krell were pushed back. The hive mind, which had seemed unstoppable, learned what fear meant. It learned that some prey fought back. It learned that conquest had a cost. Eventually, the surviving Krell forces retreated deep into unexplored space, beyond the reach of any known species. Peace came slowly, but it came. The galaxy began to heal. 5 years after the Battle of Nexus Point, Xylo stood with Morrison at a memorial on Crucible Station. The memorial was enormous, stretching for kilometers. The names of the fallen covered walls of black stone that seemed to absorb light. Every being who had died defending the Nexus Point was remembered here. Humans and Kryn, Therox and Luminari, species from across the galaxy, all united in sacrifice. Do you still feel it? Morrison asked quietly. The fear? Every day, Xylo replied. Fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of not living up to the sacrifices that were made here, fear of letting down all those who died believing we could build something better. But I have also learned to feel something else, something my species had forgotten. What is that? Morrison asked, though he probably already knew the answer. Pride, Xylo said. Pride in what we accomplished together, pride in the family we have become. You humans have a saying, we are stronger together than we are apart. United we stand, divided we fall. Morrison laughed. It was a warm sound, full of affection and memory. Something like that. Though I think the version I prefer is even simpler. United. We stand. Just those 3 words. They say everything that needs to be said. Yes, Xylo agreed. He reached out and placed a hand on Morrison's shoulder. It was a gesture he had learned from humans, this physical expression of friendship and solidarity. Standing with humans, I felt real fear for the first time in my life. But I also felt real courage. I felt real hope. I felt real friendship and real purpose. And I would not trade those experiences for all the rational certainty in the galaxy. Morrison placed his own hand on Xyloth's shoulder, completing the gesture. The galaxy owes you a debt, Commander. You were the first of your people to truly understand humans. You convinced the Council to give us a chance. You stood with us when it mattered most. History will remember you. History will remember all of us, Xylo said. Every being who died at Nexus Point, every species that put aside old grudges to face a common enemy, every individual who chose courage over safety. That is the legacy we must preserve. They stood in silence for a long moment. 2 friends honoring the dead and celebrating the future those deaths had purchased. Around them others came and went. Families leaving flowers and tokens of remembrance. Veterans of the war gathering to share stories. Young beings learning about the sacrifices of the previous generation. A young Kryn approached them hesitantly. She could not have been more than 20 years old, barely an adult by Kryn standards. Excuse me, she said. Are you Commander Xylo? I am, Xylo replied gently. My father died at Nexus Point, the young Kryn said. His name was Valen. He was a science officer on your ship. Xyloth's 3 eyes widened. Valen was a brilliant officer and a good friend. She was the one who first helped me understand human culture. I am deeply sorry for your loss. Thank you, the young woman said. I wanted you to know that I am applying to join the Unified Defense Fleet. I want to continue her work. I want to help protect what she died for. She would be very proud of you, Xylo said. And if you are accepted, I hope you will consider serving under my command. The fleet needs officers with your spirit. The young Kryn smiled and moved on to pay her respects at the memorial wall. Morrison watched her go. A new generation, he said. They have never known the old way when species stood apart. They have grown up in a galaxy that cooperates and shares. They take it for granted that different species can be friends and allies. That is our real victory, Commander. Not the battles we won, but the future we secured. Xylo nodded. It made him think about his own long life. He had lived for more than 3 centuries before meeting humans. In all that time, he had been rational, logical, efficient. He had been, by Kryn standards, perfect. And yet he had never truly lived until he learned to feel, until he learned what fear and courage and friendship really meant. The galaxy is healing, Xylo said. Trade routes are reopening. Worlds that were damaged are being rebuilt. New colonies are being established. Art and culture are flourishing again. And all of it is built on the foundation we laid at Nexus Point. Do you think the Krell will return? Morrison asked. Perhaps, Xylo admitted. Maybe in 100 years. Maybe in 1,000. But if they do, they will find a very different galaxy than the one they tried to conquer. They will find a galaxy that knows how to fight together. A galaxy that has learned human stubbornness and human creativity. A galaxy that refuses to give up. Then our work is done, Morrison said. No, Xylo corrected gently. Our work is never done. There will always be new challenges, new threats, new problems that need solving. But now we face them together. Now we have hope. Now we know that nothing is truly impossible if we stand united. As the sun began to set over Crucible Station, casting long shadows across the memorial, Xylo and Morrison turned to leave. They had duties to attend to. The galaxy did not stop turning just because they were feeling contemplative, but as they walked away from the memorial wall, Xylo felt a deep sense of contentment. He had lived for 3 centuries before meeting humans. He hoped to live for 3 centuries more, and he knew that every day of his remaining life would be richer, fuller, and more meaningful because of what he had learned. He had learned to feel fear. He had learned to feel courage. He had learned to feel friendship and hope and pride. He had learned that perfection was not found in the absence of emotion, but in the acceptance of it. He had learned what it meant to be alive. And standing with humans, fighting alongside them, learning from them, he had discovered something his species had lost in their pursuit of genetic perfection. He had discovered what it meant to have a soul. The galaxy stretched out before them, vast and full of possibilities. Thousands of worlds, billions of beings, countless stories yet to be told. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that humanity had taught the stars. That fear was not weakness. That courage was not the absence of fear but action in spite of it. That together, free beings could accomplish the impossible. That hope was not irrational, but essential. That stubbornness in the face of overwhelming odds was not foolish, but admirable. Standing with humans, Xylo had felt real fear for the first time. And in feeling that fear and accepting it and fighting alongside it, he had become more than he had ever been before. He had become whole. He had become real, and the galaxy would never be the same.